And there's no better person to talk to about all of these dynamics than America's sweetheart, Steve Kornacki, MSNBC national political correspondent, who occasionally attends this show in a jacket. Deeply appreciated, Steve.
It's my sign of respect for you, Alex.
God bless. Thank you so much for that. And I have nothing but respect and admiration for you, buddy. Now that we've gotten out of the way, if you are a New York Republican, right? First of all, a lot more Republicans went to the House in 2020 than did in 2018, right?
Yep.
Which was kind of a rout for Republicans. But if you're a New York Republican in this moment, what is your calculation as far as the Trump indictment and how and what to say about it?
Yeah, it's really tricky, I think, for Republicans in New York, because it's interesting. If you looked back, and I think folks who watched the election coverage last November remember, Democrats came very close to holding on to the House. And really, you could say New York was the lone reason. I mean, there were others out there, but you could have found 218 seats for Democrats with a couple missed opportunities in New York State. And they are these Republicans who won districts that Biden had won, and that Biden had won comfortably. We're talking 8, 10, 12-point margins in some of these districts. And I think what you saw happen in New York that helped these Republicans, and you saw it in some other places, California is another example. You mentioned Mike Garcia. He's from sort of the far fringes of Los Angeles County, Republican who got reelected. These are places where local issues, local concerns, I think about crime in the nearby cities, about quality of life issues, those issues that Republicans thought were going to resonate a lot more nationally, didn't really take nationally, but they took in New York. They took in parts of California, and they took in a couple other pockets of the country, and they really propelled those Republicans. So it's interesting when you look at these Republican incumbents moving ahead to 2024, Republicans need them to hold these seats if they're going to hold the House. Is the Trump factor the thing that's going to drive those districts, or is it still going to be something on that local crime quality of life level?
Yeah, if you guys could bring up the full screen of the representatives, the 18 Republican representatives who were elected in districts that Biden won. I mean, the lion's share of them are from New York and California. And I just wonder, let's talk about Mike Garcia. I mean, he's out there with pretty strong words against Democrats, right? And does that surprise you? I understand the calculation of I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to say something critical of President Trump, because this is, after all, a district that Biden won. But to go out and really tag the far left is the problem here. What's the political calculation there?
Garcia is such an interesting case here. So to understand his story, it's this. In 2020, when Joe Biden was winning his district easily, okay, and again, it's a district contained in Los Angeles County, but it's sort of the far reaches of Los Angeles County. So you're away from downtown L.A., okay, it's almost like Long Island is to New York. His district is to the city of Los Angeles. Big Biden district in 2020, he won by 333 votes in 2020. It was the second closest House race in the country. Democrats were very, very bullish on taking that seat in 2022. They put up the same candidate. But when you talk about those quality of life issues that voters in sort of the far reaches of L.A. County felt that were related to L.A., he won by double digits in 2022. In fact, he was the 218th seat that we called that officially gave Republicans control of the House. So it's a really interesting dynamic where if you're looking at 2020 and you're showing some of his rhetoric right now, Biden-Trump rhetoric right now, you're saying that's a guy who should be in trouble. But that's also a guy who in 2022, as his party was not having a great year in the midterms, actually improved his performance basically by double digits.